Well, good morning, everyone. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Justin Whitowich, and I'll be the moderator today. I work in account management and planning at Borshoff with a focus in advertising and brand strategy work. And I've been fortunate to work on many campaigns and brand projects in this space, including many with our friends here at the Indianapolis Zoo and Indianapolis Indians. So today we are excited to be joined by Joel Zawacki, Assistant General Manager, Corporate Sales and Marketing with the Indianapolis Indians, and Dennis Woerner, the Marketing Director at the Indianapolis Zoo. So I'll do a quick intro of our friends and guests here. First, we'll start with Joel. Joel graduated from the University of Indianapolis with a degree in sports administration. He was also a pitcher on the Greyhounds baseball team, where he earned Great Lakes Valley Conference All-Academic Team Honors. He joined the Indians in 2007 as Sponsorship Sales Coordinator and was promoted to Director of Corporate Partnerships in 2012 and added marketing to his responsibilities later that year. In his role, Joel develops and implements the marketing and communication strategies built to exceed annual attendance and revenue goals. And he leads a staff of more than 20 employees focused in various marketing, communications, and sponsorship roles, and also collaborates with his ad agency partners to develop and implement annual campaigns. So welcome, Joel. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
And our friend Dennis Woerner joined the Indianapolis Zoo as its marketing director in 2006. Dennis joined the zoo to head up its marketing program, directing a wide variety of activities, including gate admissions and group sales and special sales, sponsorships, advertising, and consumer research. In his position, Dennis is successfully guiding the zoo's marketing efforts during this COVID-19 pandemic for its newest exhibit, Timbo Camp, as well as the introduction of sloth and snake exhibits in 2019. Over the past few years, he oversaw the creation of marketing special events like Zubu, Christmas at the Zoo, and more recently, Exuberance. These successful initiatives have led to record-breaking attendance growth. In addition to working at the zoo, Dennis is on the marketing board for Downtown Indy Inc., as part of Visit Indy's marketing committee, and a member of the Indiana Tourism Association. Dennis has also served in marketing management roles in the motorsports and theme park industries. So again, welcome Dennis, welcome Joel. Thank you guys so much for being with us today, and we will get started here. So, unquestionably, this has been a very challenging and intense time for marketers, especially in sports and entertainment and attractions. And I don't want to spend all of our time discussing, COVID pandemic, but do want to spend just a little bit of time understanding what all you have gone through and the challenges and what you're doing and what you've done to ride this storm while the gates are being closed, for Indians baseball at Victory Field and for the zoo, at least early on in the spring and early summer. So we'll go to you, Joel, first. We now know that minor league baseball did not have a season this year. The entire season was canceled, and the gates to Victory Field were just unfortunately closed to baseball this year, and we're all super sad about that. We all love going to the park. But, talk to us about how you felt when that first hit, when you learned that there was going to be no baseball happening, no Indians baseball at Victory Field. How'd that feel?
Yeah, it was a slow burn for us, right? So I was actually down in Florida for spring training back in March, and we were at dinner with a couple of corporate partners, and we got the news about the NBA season being suspended, and sort of knew then that trouble was headed our way. We went to actually the Pirates game the next day, and that was the last spring training game that was actually played this year. So. Sort of surreal to be a part of that situation as it was sort of unfolding right in front of our eyes. Quickly, tried to pivot to our staff, right? I was with our president and GM, Randy Lewandowski, down in Florida, and we're trying to communicate back to our staff about a work from home plan and how we're going to handle things, over the coming weeks as we're sort of obtaining information. So that was sort of a couple of first steps, shifted from there, obviously, to more communication to our season ticket holders, our corporate partners, on how we were going to handle their partnership agreements. And that was sort of the phase one For us, obviously, the season didn't formally get canceled until really June 30th. So it was, like I said, a slow burn.
Yeah. And what was the reaction of the rest of your team? How are you guys able to kind of quickly gather and just kind of reassure them that we've got a plan in place and, things are going to be as good as they can be? And so what was that process like?
Yeah, a lot of conversations internally about how we wanted to handle things. Certainly tried to scenario plan as best we could about what were the potential outcomes that could happen, because again, early on in the spring we were still hopeful that we would have a portion of a season. So if we were able to open the gates, what did that look like? If we were at a reduced capacity or socially distanced seating, what would that need to look like? And again, how would we handle that with our partners, our season ticket holders, and such? So a lot of scenario planning, a lot of spinning wheels early on about how we could best handle the situation.
Awesome. Thanks, Joel. Dennis, same question for you. I mean, what was it like when you first heard that, the zoo was to be closed, at least for a short time? I know you've reopened to some capacity now, but, what was that initial feeling and reaction like? And what did you guys do to quickly regroup with your team and start coming up with a plan?
Yeah, I think the first reaction was shock and like, okay, let's slow down, let's not panic here, because we shut down in the middle of March, and we already had made significant commitments to get ready for the year. I mean, we're open year round, but March is when we normally really start kicking off the spring with our spring event exuberance. And so we already had set up the Bicentennial Pavilion, getting it ready for that spring event. So we were making commitments to our vendor that actually sets up the pavilion with buildings, and we were buying all kinds of plants. And from the advertising side, we had an ad plan in place with Borshoff. We were getting ready to roll that out, and all of a sudden the rug got pulled out from under our feet. And so you're sitting there going, wow, okay, we just spent all this money and we're not going to open the gates. So it was like, what do you do next? Because there is no blueprint for this stuff. I mean, who is planning for a pandemic that you've never been through, right?
Right.
So, we were all kind of wondering that, but we also wanted to make sure that our people, our employees, were feeling comfortable, that we didn't want them to panic. They were getting calls in group sales, like companies that were booking picnics, for like May. What are you doing? Are you going to, can I get a refund, or what can we do about that? We were getting brides. We do weddings here. They were concerned about, are you going to be able to do a wedding? Been planning this for over a year now. So we were getting those type of calls, and we had to really, first off, calm our people, make sure that they knew they were going to work from home, set up a plan for that. But then we had to also start thinking about how we're going to do with our clients that are out there. So it was a whirlwind, put it that way. And you just we were just kind of going through it step by step as things came up.
Yeah, I think you said it well. There's no playbook or blueprint for this, and I think both organizations have done a nice job. And so coming back to more about the marketing and the promotions around both Victory Field and the zoo. So what were some of your decisions about marketing and messaging, right? So typically as the Indian season is ramping up and the zoo's opening up with exuberance and some of your summer programming, there weren't tickets to sell to drive gate attendance. So for the zoo, Dennis, you weren't necessarily able to bring people in and have those close connections directly with the animals. So people love those educational experiences within the zoo grounds itself. So how are you, I know probably I'll stick with the word pivot, but how are you able to course correct and message and stay connected with your audiences and keep them engaged with your animals and provide educational experiences when they weren't actually able to come through the grounds?
Right. I mean, there were two main things that happened. Number one was the educational aspect, because all school field trips were canceled. So we started doing distance learning with these schools. And so they were able to do our education department was able to do some topics focused around animals and trying to keep the schools engaged that way with their classes via Zoom for the most part. So that became a critical component. But we also utilize social media, YouTube in particular, because our PR team got out there and started doing Facebook Live, and we were doing specials on little things from like just showing sea lions in their habitat and just showing animals having fun. And then we also were showing the elephants and different animals that we had around the zoo just to get engagement with our Facebook followers and letting people know that, yeah, even though the gate isn't open, we're still here. We're still part of this community.
And what sort of response and reaction did you receive via social media engagement and discussions on social media?
It was very positive. People were, everybody else was shut down too. I mean, if you go back and think about what was going on, people were looking for something positive, something to hold on to. And I really think that it helped people's morale in the community, just being able to see what was going on and know that, hey, the zoo is out there, they're taking care of the animals, and this is giving us hope for something better coming down the road.
That's great. And Joel, what about you guys and the Indians? And we'll talk here in a couple of minutes about some of the creative ways you brought fans and families into Victory Field for different events, but specific to the Indians and the Indians brand and our connection to baseball, what did you all do and how were you able to stay in front of your fans and families and keep them connected to Indians baseball when you couldn't have a season this year?
Yeah, so with really no start of the season in sight, we tried to shift the focus away from us and again, to Dennis's point, how could we be a resource and really help the community? So last year we started Indianapolis Indians Charities. We had some resources there that we could utilize for COVID relief. And so we developed a handful of programs there, a merchandise match program where we ended up donating $20,000 to gleaners. Food banks obviously were struggling over the course of this time. A handful of other charity type events. And then to Dennis's point, yeah, you had all these kids and these teachers that are trying to do e-learning at home, and how can we be a resource for them? So we already have a great baseball and education program and curriculum developed. We made that essentially available online, sent it out to a lot of our teachers and contacts there so they could still incorporate that into their e-learning programs that they were doing. And then we also, reached out to our partners, their businesses were being affected as well, and try to find ways that we could certainly, promote them and push our fans to continue to shop and buy local and help out our partners.
Nice. And what sort of response did you receive from your fans? I saw some early social media, engagement metrics, and it seemed like things were even higher year over year than in previous year. People were enjoying the content and the educational experiences that you were giving them on social media.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably thought, early on in the pandemic that it was probably a slower time and we're kind of waiting to see where we could go. But, our marketing team was as active as could be on social with publishing, interesting content, like I mentioned with the baseball and education program. So They kept us certainly top of mind with our audience throughout those months. I just think that the support for the community, we saw it with the donations that we were and the money we were able to raise for Indians charities.
Awesome. So before we move on to kind of the current climate and landscape of, Victory Field and Indianapolis Zoo, to Dennis's point, there's no playbook or blueprint for any of this. It's all unprecedented. I'm sure you guys could both write one now hopefully there isn't a next one, but what lessons did you learn along the way? And looking back again, knowing there wasn't a playbook, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Wow. I think the main thing was being flexible, making sure that you're flexible with your clients out there, from sponsorships to group sales, in terms of, I go back to the weddings a second. We had some brides that were literally freaking out. As you can imagine, it's the most important day of their life. So we established where, either a refund or we'll move your date back and we'll just apply your deposit to that if that's what you want to do. We were just trying to be as flexible as we could with these people. We didn't want anybody to come out of this with a bad taste in their mouth. Sponsorships, we had a lot of sponsors that were supposed to be active during exuberance. So we basically just said, okay, we'll honor the terms of your agreement later in the year. We'll make sure you have that awareness somewhere down the road. So, I don't know if there's any way. I think we did a pretty good approach as far as what we did. Would I change anything? Other than not having a pandemic, I'm not sure, because we just had to think on our feet. And, there is no way I think that you can plan for something quite like that.
Sure. Anything on your side, Joel?
Yeah, to Dennis's point, I think it's a tough question to answer with it really being the first time we went through, this scenario. So certainly proud of our team and the way we handled the situation. I do think we did the best that we could. I think some of the frustration from our staff was, again, we felt like a lot of times we were sort of spinning our wheels. So if there's, if there was a way to put some structure in place on, these are events that we should start planning for or trying to work on. It just got to the point where the content ideas were nonstop. So just trying to weed through some of that and create a little more structure and direction would probably be the only tweak, but certainly a hard time and challenging time to do that.
Absolutely. Well, great. Thank you for that sort of background on early on what you guys were facing and how you dealt with it. That's really helpful, and you guys both did a great job. But I'd like to move on to kind of the current landscape and what we're up to now. So again,
Justin?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did have a question that I thought I'd throw out, if that sounds all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, did you speak with any of your industry peers to get any additional ideas on how to move through the pandemic and engage audiences? I'm sure, especially because of the associations that you all belong to, you probably had some sort of interactions and maybe even some sort of guidance, but just curious how others in maybe other markets, if anything that they did influenced your thinking about how you would proceed with what you were trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, talking to different attractions through Visit Indy, trying to understand what they were doing. And, a lot of the things that we talked about had to do with the governors and the mayors' mandates on masks and capacities. Capacities was an interesting one, because at one point we were allowed only 25% of our normal attendance in the zoo. Now that's been lifted, but we have self-imposed the 50% capacity in the zoo. So, technically we don't have a capacity, but we estimated it around 12,000 max in the zoo at one time. We've put a restriction of 4,000 on that because of social distancing, and we just want to have a safe environment. So, talking to my peers about safety and social distancing, how are you guys doing that? What are you doing about hand sanitizer throughout your attraction? Indoor attractions versus outdoor attractions. And I worked with Visit Indy on that. I worked with Downtown Indy Inc., as well as some of my counterparts at other zoos. And I called some of my friends that are still in the theme park industry. So I found that everybody was going through the same stuff, but there were, different, and there were the same frustrations. But what came down to is, how are you dealing with these capacity restrictions, and how are you dealing with masks? Because not everybody comes in your gate, even though they're required to have a mask, wants to wear a mask. So you had to deal with that type of situation, but it was all good information.
Yeah, agreed. So really those early conversations were centered around safety, for reopening. So there's two different groups that we sort of engaged with. One was a lot of the other sports teams. There was essentially a weekly call, and sports and attractions, weekly call with the city. Really every venue was putting together safety, sanitation plans, and sharing those across the board. So that's certainly helpful. We were a little bit later in starting our event cycle, which I know we'll get to. And then the other group certainly is minor league and Major League Baseball. They're calls with other teams essentially every week on, again, everything from how they were handling groups and season ticket holders and how they were planning for additional events. So a couple of different resources there.
That's great. Thank you. And if anyone else has other questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can throughout the conversation today. One other question for both of you, just related to maybe some unusual channels that you might have used that maybe you didn't use before. Did you discover some new ways to communicate with your target audiences that perhaps you hadn't really taken full advantage of prior to the pandemic? You both mentioned, much heavier reliance on social media, but were there other potential channels that you really used more so than normal?
Well, social media was really huge, obviously. From an advertising perspective, we kind of pivoted a bit more and relied a lot more on digital than what we were originally planning. This was going to be a challenging year anyway with our media plan because of the election. So TV was always kind of a concern that we were going to have to adjust some of that. But now with the pandemic, with what we were trying to communicate, digital just made more sense. Like when we reopened the zoo in mid-June, we had to have a welcome back campaign, welcoming people back and explaining to them that it was going to be safe. But how are you going to, what are you putting in place so that they know that the zoo is safe? So, talking about wearing masks and social distancing, digital just seemed to lend itself to be a more, applicable platform for us to get that message across.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any new channels that we used, other than I would just say that we leaned on, again, a lot of our city and local relationships to share information. That was certainly key. Just understanding the situation as fully as we could before we essentially acted on developing and creating any sort of events to bring fans in. Obviously leaned on our social channels and our owned media. We pulled the plug on really all of our advertising early on with no season in sight. So we weren't relying on any paid advertising really until later in the summer when we started to roll out some of these events. So we were dark from that standpoint. I would say we spent a lot of time developing those safety guidelines and information on our website in preparation for how we would open up and how we would handle events. So that would be just one of the communication piece where we felt like we had to go the extra mile to let fans know what we were doing.
Great. Thanks, guys. Let's talk a little bit about that, going back to kind of the current landscape. Joel, you mentioned, creating some new events, getting really creative on how we can bring families and fans and audiences back to Victory Field, right? Because canceled season, Indians baseball is your business's primary revenue source, right? So talk a little bit about what you've done to make up for some of that lost revenue, and were there any really hard decisions that you had to make along the way?
Yeah, so again, our first focus was sort of on Indians baseball, and obviously our season ticket holders and our partners, and I think Dennis alluded to this earlier, but we wanted to be flexible and do right by them and make sure. And we know some of their businesses were being impacted, so restructuring those agreements, knowing that we weren't going to have a season, if there's any assets or anything that we could activate and tie them into some of these events that we were looking to plan, that was kind of step one. But really just trying to focus on the long term, right? That's what we felt like was going to set us up for the most success in the long run. So that's where we started. From there, we've always sort of lived in this baseball box, right? We've got 70 events. We've got an awesome facility, a beautiful field. Our groundskeeper is a little particular on maintaining it and keeping it that way. So typically he's not quite as open as he was this year on doing some of these events. But as you can see in some of the photos that Justin just shared, we've always thrown around the idea of movie nights. So the marketing team worked to develop flicks at the ballpark. So we had 3 movie nights. We're able to activate a partnership with Indiana WIC to make those happen. Got beautiful weather on all 3 of them, sold out a crowd of about 1,500 or 2,000. So really successful event. Tough to beat watching a movie on the big screen out in the outfield or in the stands. I guess I should backpedal a little bit. We did start out with a couple of baseball events first. So we did some youth baseball games. Again, we're talking about 5 or 6 games a day, which we typically would never allow on our diamond or on our field, but we certainly opened that up. We were able to grab a couple of games from Grand Park and host their championships. So that was certainly successful. We sold over 1,000 tickets for each of those events. Some more community events. You see the blood drive. We did that through charities, and obviously there was a need for blood donations. We did an auto show, so we've got cars driving out on the field in each of the positions. And then probably our most successful was our links at Victory Field. This is one I've wanted to do for a long time. San Diego, the Padres, I believe, are the first ones to do it. This jumps around to, tons of professional venues. These days, there's a group out there that does this, but we decided to host ours on our own, and we had some good support from Mizuno and a couple of golf courses here locally to help us make it happen. But we just finished up our second round of this past weekend. About 500, 600 golfers a day that played a 9-hole course at the ballpark, and it's tough to beat that view hitting from the new club space that was just finished this spring.
Yeah, really great events, Joel. Thanks for that summary there. Dennis, what about you? Have you guys done anything different and creative to try and drive business when you're at a limited capacity in terms of gate attendance right now?
Well, one of the things that we implemented was timed ticketing. And so everybody has to go to our website, to the web store to buy a time ticket, or if you're a member, you need to get a timed reservation. And the whole purpose of that is to spread out our crowd so that we don't overload the zoo at any one time. We spread it out so that people can go indoor to indoor attractions or see the animals in the outdoor exhibits, and be socially distanced and feel safe. They'll have their masks on and they'll be safe. How have we, what have we done to help make up some of that lost revenue? Well, I think the time ticketing actually helped us when we reopened with our new exhibit, Tembo Camp. Tembo Camp is a very intimate experience with our elephants down in the back section of the zoo. And with crowds being spaced out more, the crowds down there aren't as large. So it gave people a chance to really connect with those elephants, actually be right next to an elephant and touch an elephant. So I think that was actually worked out better for us in a weird way, because normally it would have been so crowded down there, you may not have been able to get that close to that elephant. So that really was something that played in our favor. You know, some of the other things that we did, for Zubu, that we just opened up a couple weeks ago, we added a couple of special member preview days so that the members could come in and experience Zubu before the regular crowds. That wasn't in the original plans, but we thought, well, this will help spread out again the crowds, but it also gives the members something special that makes them feel special. So we did that. You know, just again, being flexible with our group sales accounts and our sponsorship accounts, our clients, and just trying to make them feel special, that we really, you know, we really want to work with those guys. And quite frankly, it's all helped out. Each month, our attendance has been getting better, to the point where Zubu right now is ahead of last year, which was a record year for us. So we're bouncing back. It's been a gradual bounce back, and we'll see as long as COVID doesn't go crazy on us again, we're looking forward to a successful Christmas at the zoo.
Great. It looks like we had a couple questions in the chat, or at least one question in the chat.
Yes. So Courtney's asking about internal communications, and this may not necessarily be in your particular roles, but we're just curious to know how you communicated internally with your staffs to really not only update them, but just to keep up morale, since this was such a challenging time. You know, Dennis, earlier you mentioned the importance of getting your staff set to do their jobs remotely before you really had the opportunity to start answering all of those unanswered questions from the public. But can you talk a little bit more about your staff and your communications with them?
Absolutely. So yeah, working from home is a whole new thing for us and most of the attractions that are out there, because normally your team is in the office and you have a lot of things going on. You communicate through personal face-to-face meetings normally, or you have a lot of things that you have to do to set up an event. When you're working from home, thank goodness for technology, okay? So it was kind of awkward at first, but we utilized Teams quite a bit, and Zoom. I've been on more Zoom calls and Teams calls than I ever imagined. And that has become a very big deal in terms of communicating with your team. So I communicate with my guys one-on-one weekly. Every week we talk through what's coming up. We also do some marketing team calls, but the whole division, the external relations division, where it's marketing, PR, creative services, fundraising, membership, we all do a joint call at least once every month to kind of see how things are going, just talking through new developments so that everybody knows what's going on. We're all on the same page. And we also try to do some fun things, like when you took your last vacation, put a picture on there where you went and explain to us why that was so fun. So we tried to make some, have some fun with it also, just to kind of lift spirits, as well as communicate anything new that was coming down the road. Technology has been awesome in this regard. We couldn't have done it. I can't imagine doing this type of situation 10, 15 years ago, it would have been totally different. And this has worked a lot better, I got to tell you.
Yeah, on our end, it was a pretty dramatic shift, especially early on. You've got a staff here that is used to working, 60 to 100 hours at the ballpark, and in any given week during the summer, and basically to send a group and have them work from home for a couple of months there. It's a pretty dramatic change. So yeah, lots of happy hours and interactions that way. Especially early on. We did shift to sort of an optional staggered schedule in the office so we could keep people distanced, but still give people that opportunity. We just, as a part of that $8 million club renovation I referenced earlier, we did just add a new admin wing. So people were excited to get back into the office and move into their new spaces, which I think happened in late May or early June. So I think that was exciting and a nice morale boost for everybody to just kind of get settled back in and know, obviously, the facility was still here. But I think, the big thing on the events, and it truly is a team effort on our end to make these happen. These were all new events. Again, no playbook or really rhyme or reason on how how these could come about. So we really had to start from scratch on developing all of those, and that required buy-in from really everybody that works here. So the staff's the one that worked these events to put them on and make them happen. So our staff's been coming in. We're not hiring game day employees or things of that nature to put on these events. It's our full-time staff coming in to make these happen. So really A to Z, they've been involved in that process, both planning and executing them as we get going.
Great. I'd like to move on to kind of the future outlook. We've talked about what we've learned in the past, kind of the current landscape, all the creative ways you've maintained a connection with your audiences and still been able to drive some revenue. But looking into, I guess we'll start with Joel and the Indians into 2021. What does a baseball game look like at Victory Field next year? Will the ballpark experience at Victory Field ever be the same? What changes might we expect? Yeah,
it's again hard questions to answer right now. Not knowing where the world will be at in 6 or 8 months. We're hopeful that there's a vaccine and certainly things will go back to normal where we can be at full capacity. But I will say, obviously, we've had a chance to put on some events with socially distanced seating manifests in limited capacity. So we've got some experience in it and feel good about if that's the situation we're presented, we'll be able to adapt and work through those scenarios. I was just actually reading Front Office Sports came out with an article this morning, the Dodgers. And I think the state of California announced that professional teams would be able to sell a certain percentage of their capacity based on essentially the color tier that their state was in. So if they're in the orange tier, they can sell 20%. If they're in a yellow tier, they can sell 25%. So it's just interesting how different states will handle those situations depending on where this virus is at come next spring. So we do feel good about there'll be baseball next year, hopefully at full capacity. And I do feel like the experience will return to normal and even be better. I think there's a pent up demand for people to go out and enjoy these attractions, not only obviously Victory Field, but the other attractions that we have around the city and be with one another. And there's going to be a pent up demand for that. We are an outdoor venue like the zoo. I think that helps our cause as well for this given situation. So we're a gathering place, and I think once that starts to open up, we're going to be one of the first places that people want to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely pent up demand to get back out and enjoy the things that we love, like the zoo and Indians baseball and all the other great attractions around the city. Early on in the pandemic, I think consumer sentiment has shifted a little bit because there's that pent up demand to get out of our houses and go enjoy the things we used to do. But earlier on, I'm sure a lot of this still exists. A lot of research in sports and entertainment suggested that consumers are more likely to return to events, attractions, and large gatherings if and when they feel safe and healthy. So all these things we've been talking about, masks and social distancing and hand sanitizer. So, start with you, Joel. What are you guys doing to ensure safety for fans that might have this, potential roadblock to return? And is that going to affect any of your messaging in your marketing and advertising moving forward?
Yeah, I do think it will. Certainly, again, the experiences that we've had with these other events that we've put on are going to help guide us as we put on baseball events. Next spring, we've got detailed reports from NFL teams on, there's NFL teams using drones to sanitize their facilities. There's so many different things out there now. And we've got an elaborate sanitation plan laid out. Again, how we communicate that to fans is certainly something that we're continuing to work on. That we'll highlight, obviously on our website. We've solicited a lot of feedback from the events that we've had on, did you feel like the ballpark was clean, sanitized? Did you feel safe? All those sorts of questions to help us improve any areas where we might have holes or might have gaps. So it's going to be a big part of our communication plan as we head into 2021. And I just think, again, the state of the world and where we're at will help guide those plans.
Yeah, for sure. Dennis, same question. I know, we're having some success with Zubu and hopefully the same thing with Christmas at the Zoo, but looking into, next spring exuberance and next summer at the zoo, what does that look like? And I guess even getting a little bit more granular with some of your very significant and important events like the Indianapolis Prize. For those of you who don't know, focuses on recognizing outstanding achievements in animal conservation, and of course, Zubilation, one of the most popular events in the city, both of which were postponed or canceled this year. So, what do those look like? How do those come back in 2021?
Well, I think there is some optimism right now because we seem to be coming back to, we're trying to get back to normal. We're not quite there, but things are looking pretty good at the moment. I do think that for 21, we have to be planning for COVID to be around. Nobody knows when we can defeat this disease because the vaccine isn't available. It's still in a very much a testing mode, as we all know. So we have to assume that we're going to be dealing with this type of situation in some regard well into 21. So what we have learned is that you can operate with safety restrictions and under capacity restrictions. So we need to implement that, but we also need to communicate in a lot of different ways that the zoo is a safe environment to come out to. And we're doing our visitor research also to get some feedback on what people are thinking about safety and if they have any recommendations. So that will help. We are planning for all those things for next year. Yes, exuberance. Yes, we're planning for Zubilation, and certainly the Indianapolis Prize in September of 21. But we have to also plan on COVID being around. So we will have to continue to adjust. We have to monitor the situation. We have to adjust to the environment that we're in. And as far as the advertising, we have to also have some flexibility in those plans. I really think it's about communicating the safety because people, number one, need to be assured that it's going to be a safe experience. But as Joel stated, being an outdoor attraction like we both are, I think that definitely helps our cause. Some of our friends that are all indoor attractions have a little more difficult time with that. So makes our jobs a little easier, but we nevertheless, we have to deal with that. We have to be prepared to get that messaging out there through public relations, and I think through some of the programs that we were doing social media-wise with YouTube, continuing to show the zoo and zoo animals, that bring people up and make them excited about coming back to the zoo. And I think, so, and I do believe that distance learning is going to be with us for a long time with the schools. I really do believe that.
Yeah, great.
Those things.
So, you know, kind of hanging on some of the marketing aspects of your businesses, and of course, you know, revenue was limited or decreased compared to the previous years because of the pandemic. So what sort of things have you guys done to be, you know, crafty and efficient in promoting your businesses with limited budgets in 2020? And, you know, what have you tracked that's been working well, and how might this change or influence your planning and strategy and budgets for 2021?
I think our budgets for next year are going to be conservative. We're not going to go back to where we were. So I think that from a media perspective, advertising-wise, we're going to do a lot of the things that we were doing. We'll rely more on digital, I think. I think we're going to use social media to the max. I think we have to be creative with some of our group sales programming. That was the first thing to go, and it'll probably be the last thing to come back. You know, corporate events, because one thing we pivoted on was a lot of them don't want to do an event bringing their people together. We just had a holiday party canceled because someone on that company got COVID. Right. So they canceled. So instead, what we're pivoting to is having our sales team sell discounted tickets to those companies so that people can come out on their own and basically sell them a good any day ticket. They can come out and determine what day they want to visit. So that's been something that we've been doing, and I think we're going to have to really focus on that going into next year. It will take a while for group sales event business to come back, and you know, putting out special offers. I think a lot of companies are going to be budget challenged next year. So from the corporate side, we have to put out there some significant offers to fit within their budgets. Sure. So a lot of different areas you have to look at.
Joel, a little bit on your end, what have you guys learned kind of operating, you know, being a little bit more maybe budget conscious than you have in the past just because you've been forced to be, and how might that influence 2021?
Yeah, we're in that process right now, budgeting for 2021. You know, again, I think right now we're planning on a couple of different scenarios, right? What is the new, even if we are able to be at 100% capacity, what do those revenues look like? What do those expenses look like? And from there, I think you can sort of scenario plan and scale down based on capacity limitations. So that's sort of the exercise that we're working through now. My best guess is a starting point. We'll probably start at somewhere around 2/3. I mean, again, we're anticipating losing about $6 million in 2020. So we're going to need to make up for a little bit of that in 2021 if possible. So yeah, certainly, you know, leaning on our partners, you know, the media, TV partners, our radio partner, iHeart, they've been, you know, they've gone out of their way to help us promote some of these events. And I know that I feel like that they're gonna step up and help us through 2021 as well with the conversations that I've had. So just leaning on those relationships. Visit Indy's been great. The Sports Corp's been great. And those maybe are partners that we haven't leaned on as hard in the past. And even the other attractions, right? Like the zoo and the Children's Museum and such, you know, we're gonna have to help each other through the next year or two to get by and get things back to normal. So it's definitely an extra grind, and you got to work a little bit harder to squeeze out the revenue and to make it work. But we'll get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that insight into, you know, how you guys are making it work and, you know, what that looks like for next year. One more question, and then if we have any other additional questions in the chat, we can get to those. But what is, you know, out of all of this that's happened and all the challenges that you guys have overcome, you know, what, if there's anything, what is the most positive thing that will come out of this that will affect, the industry overall, sports and zoo and attraction industry, and maybe your specific organizations and brands?
I think it helped. One thing it did is I think it really instilled a lot of creativity. We had to really think out of the box. We had to think differently. That was one big thing that came out of all this, is it spurred creativity. You can't operate the way you have been. So I think that really helped. The other thing is it brought our team together. I think it really brought this camaraderie thing to a hilt. It really brought everybody together. We were all pulling together and trying to lean on each other to have a positive result. And it's brought a closeness that we probably had, it's more than what we ever had before, put it that way. And
Nice.
Brought the team together, I think.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Dennis. I said earlier that we've always kind of been in this baseball box and maybe haven't pushed as hard on creating some of these unique events at this awesome venue that we have. And so now that we've had a season without baseball, there are these events that I think that will become annual traditions here at the ballpark, and I think it'll open us up to trying some new things. So in the long run, I think that'll attract more than just baseball fans to the ballpark. I think we've got in front of some new audiences because of these events that we've put on, and hopefully they'll come back and experience other events like baseball events or some of these other things that we're putting on. So I think we've widened our net a little bit this summer from what we've done.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that's done that to most industries and most businesses, brought us closer and forced us to just be more creative on what we do and how we bring in revenue. So it's really nice to hear, and thank you for those great examples. It doesn't look like there's any more questions in the chat, so we can wrap up here. I wanted to thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Joel. We really appreciate it. Really helpful, great insights. Again, thanks for being transparent and open about all the challenges you guys have faced and how you've been solving them. It's been really nice to hear. And thank you to all of our guests today. If they might find it valuable, please feel free to share it.